Driveline R&D podcast, episode 90. It's your boy, Kyle Caravan, filling in for Alex Caravan because he's not on the pod. Anthony is in Wichita, Kansas, right? Wichita's in Kansas.
I think so.
At the NBC World Series tournament, trying to win the Studs another championship. Today, I'm drinking we call it poop coffee from the Keurig in the company kitchen because it's not the best tasting coffee in the world. Today we have Bill Hezel, director of pitching at Driveline Baseball, and David Besky, player development coordinator.
Coordinator of player development analytics.
Beautiful.
I thought I was filling in for Caravan on the data side.
That's true.
I don't know what I'm doing here anymore.
No. That's actually a good point. I was just filling in for the intro. Yeah. How's the summer going? Besky's been working more closely with the training floor than really ever in the last few months. How's the summer training and summer load been?
I think the load has been pretty crazy. I mean, it's always crazy in the summer. We get so many college guys, and just a variety of other athletes. But when you think about now that we have a bigger space and we can fit more guys into a throwing slot, we can run more efficient hours, but it allows us to expand the academy and do some other things. I mean, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah,
it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, we always it's kind of messed up my night lifts because we always got people training in here until like 8 or 9 p.m. or whatever. But yeah, that's why. What about on the analytics side? Doing any data collection projects or anything?
Nothing too crazy. I mean, we're getting to the point in the summer where we're starting to see more retests because we're 6 weeks out from when a lot of guys got here in May, early June. So it's good to see those retests, see some gains on that front, and just be able to sort of analyze retests, adjust training plans according to that. Yeah. Based on what we're seeing, how things are working with guys. So
hell yeah,
I think that's probably the biggest thing sort of around this time. Also kind of getting hot out here in Seattle now. So it's really, really getting that summer energy going on the floor.
Yeah, fuck it. And more velo days, right? Because more people are done with their on-ramping.
Yeah. And just, the general need for, college athletes, or at least a large portion of them, is to gain velo. But this is also, we've made some changes to some of the deliverables and stuff. A lot of the stuff that Besky specifically has worked on, in terms of test to retest and even like an initial assessment stuff, just like their composite scores, percentile rankings. There's just like some more deliverables that we can leverage and tools that we can use internally that I think make the athlete meeting and even the retest meeting much more efficient, much more actionable, and kind of hit home the key points in the upcoming training phase a little bit easier. And just make things much more efficient and targeted for the athlete, which is really good.
They're using the dashboards now that you made for athlete meetings.
I think the biggest thing is our new composite score report that kind of dials in on sort of grading out different areas of the delivery rather than having to go metric by metric throughout the pages and kind of make sense of the normative values. It just kind of provides one grade for your lower half, which in a retest context is especially useful for there are some trade-offs between certain metrics. So say you're able to get more scap retraction, but you do that by lowering your arm, just timing up foot plants slightly differently. On the whole, does it work out to be a positive across the different metrics? So by kind of focusing on those, we're able to sort of summarize data and be a little bit more efficient in terms of evaluating changes.
That's fire.
Yeah, it helps the athlete kind of take a step back, and if the athlete want, or if even we want to ask the goal in this throwing phase was to improve lower half mechanics. Did that happen? And the composite score rankings help with that. When you're looking metric by metric, it's much more nuanced, and it's easy to get lost in my lead knee extension angular velo was better, but I produced less foot, whatever. It's a little bit more succinct and easier for the athlete to see that I was working on this specific thing. This was the focus of this training block from a mechanics perspective. And I was 50th percentile. Now I'm 70th or whatever,
Have we been able to incorporate the force plates? I honestly haven't really looked through the composite report much. Is that a part of the composite report, the force plates?
Those are currently just in the main report. For backwards compatibility with all the stuff when we didn't have force plates. We're kind of that aspect of it, specifically like from a blocking standpoint, is kind of constrained to the sort of kinematic measures for the block, which we have a couple different ways of slicing and dicing it. So we probably capture like a decent amount of the force plate stuff, but that's still kind of working on being integrated.
Yeah. That's interesting because I remember specifically with you, there was a mobile assessment trip we went on where there was a guy who had a lot of lateral tilt and his arm slot was really high and he had like a good amount of vertical break on his fastball. We were like, yeah, you could probably get more neutral to maybe rotate a little bit better in the throw. Like that's what we would typically recommend for somebody, just like strictly based on biomechanics. We're like, okay, is this going to help him overall? Like we've considering,
and we did do some investigations on force plate stuff that I'm not sure if we've like totally, maybe we put it on a blog or something, but we, just like very basic stuff with the initial data that we collected, like looking at like, all right, does the actual like direction that the force is imparted matter as much as like the total force? And we've like looked at some things like that. I definitely think like there's a lot more for us to figure out and unlock there, but we still just need a lot of data collection from a wide group of skill levels to really kind of like draw any conclusions there.
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest things from the initial scope of that was like putting force into the ground horizontally and vertically, sort of towards home plate and away from second base on the back leg and sort of back towards second on the lead leg, and then down into the ground on the back leg and out of the ground on the front leg. Like those all correlate to ball velo on par with like top biomechanical, whatever other metrics. So like those are things that we're looking for. It probably relates somewhat to like the other stuff we look at for the block though. So just figuring out the balance of like how to weight all those in sort of a composite score. And if someone's block looks good above the ground, but he's not producing force, just being able to evaluate that and kind of weight it appropriately.
Yeah, for sure. The negative GRF with the back leg is interesting. I don't know if you talked to Dean Jackson about that, but he originally had that was one of his theories about like the center of gravity velocity in the Z direction. That's like he was like, I'm seeing a lot of really hard throwers like go down like in the Z direction into the ground with his pelvis really quickly or with his center of gravity. So that's funny. And also we got new plyos coming out.
Yeah, that's right. At the time we're recording this, next week, so August 3rd, they're launching. Yeah, pretty fired up. We've been using them, testing them, whatever you want to call it, in the facility for quite a while. Even the pink ball, I think the first prototype we made of it.
Pink is 1,500.
Yeah,
1,500 grams.
The 1,500 ball. I think the first prototype that was made of it was basically Bodie's idea. And I think it was like 3 years ago. I mean, we were in the old facility, and I remember he just like rolled out 2 of them and was just like, here's what I got. And even the newer ones that obviously we've put some promo and we've done some stuff with the pink ball already. Put a blog out, which I think we'll talk about here a little bit. But even the new ones, we've been using them internally and playing around with them for quite a while. And even before we manufactured these, we had trainers using the hitting plyos to kind of like, hack together this set anyway. So yeah, we're pretty excited. I think the use cases for them and the ways that you can use them are pretty like limitless, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But yeah, I'm pretty excited. August 3rd, they'll be live.
Yeah, that's exciting. You don't throw like all of them, right? Like if somebody was to be like either for their daily plow routine or like a plow velo, like which ones?
Yeah. So I think the best way to like summarize the idea behind the new plyos is you want to have more implements to work with, because based on the athletes and specifically more weights, honestly, because based on the athletes' age, skill level, training history, a variety, time of year, throwing phase, all these different things, you want to be able to scale up or down the weight of the implements, right? So there's going to be times or situations where you want to shade on the heavier side of things. There's going to be times where you maybe want to shade on the lighter side of things, depending on what adaptation you're trying to drive or what your training goal is. And then there's also going to be times where you're going to want to do that based on the athlete's like age or skill level, right? Like, being able to, create a plyo set that shades a little bit lighter, but is still heavier or around the same weight as a baseball, it's probably pretty important for like youth athletes. Being able to shade a set like heavier is probably beneficial to, say, athletes that are coming back or like post-surgery or something, where we're trying to keep torque values down early in the throwing program. Maybe we're going to pair, the heavier set with like them only throwing 6-ounce balls to start or something like that, which is pretty common. There's just like a ton of use cases, and which I'm sure we'll talk about, but no, you don't throw all of them. The idea would be you want to keep, generally speaking, the throwing volume and throw counts relatively the same
Similar.
as you would as our normal programming, but the idea is that you could just switch up the ball weights. That being said, though, something that I did this offseason was, earlier on, in like an on-ramp or an accumulation phase or more of a developmental phase, if I'm skewing the ball slightly heavier, that may allow for me to add in some additional throws because, total stress, if you want to look at it that way, might be lower. So it might be a way to steal some extra throws.
Yeah, for sure. That makes a ton of sense to me on the return to throw stuff too, because I know there's just been some work done in the past with like using heavier balls early, whether it's an on-ramp or a return to throw, like keeping that peak stress down when you're trying to rehab a tissue in the rest of your body. And like, it's also just way easier to throw a heavy ball at a low intent than it is a baseball. Like if you throw a baseball at 50% or less than 50%, whatever, it's going to feel like super weird. Your mechanics are probably not going to be anything like close to what your actual like medium to max intent mechanics are, but it's much easier to do that with if you have a higher load.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the ways I use them with a big leaguer this off season. Actually, Dylan Tate. He just, naturally early on in his throwing programs, like just can throw really hard. And he's obviously been with us for a handful of years, and just working with him for so long, I know that like early on in his throwing programs, like if he feels good, he kind of wants to let it eat. So, last off season, this previous one, or the one before it, I should say, there were times where we'd be like 3 weeks into our on-ramp and, dude's throwing 95-mile-an-hour gray balls, which is probably not the best thing. So a way to hack that, maybe keep the intensity up, keep the throwing volume up, is like, I just didn't let him throw anything lighter than a yellow ball for like a large portion of the on-ramp and the developmental phase, because if he blows out a red ball or something like that, I prefer that over him, like, blowing out an underload ball so early in his like, throwing program or whatever. So, there is a way to use these to kind of like help auto-regulate intensity, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. You can also probably like, for somebody who's training long-term enough, you can probably kind of tune it to what they're seeing the best results with, maybe. Like, I don't know, if they go with the standard set first, or they want to like, okay, I feel better with the light balls, or like I'm throwing the light balls better or the heavy balls better, like leaning into one or the other and kind of seeing what helps your 5-ounce feel a little bit better. Like during your testing days. That
was also kind of one of the main drivers behind even doing it was, we've done a lot on like trying to look at like expected velocity numbers across a variety of different departments. But what has always been like somewhat of interest to us is like, all right, this guy throws this hard on the mound. What would be a good green ball for him, or a good blue ball for him, or whatever? And if that is below expectation, like what does that mean? Is that something we should focus on? And there probably is some, a group of athletes where they should probably throw more of the balls that they are bad at or performing below expectation on. And so we basically made a calculator to kind of figure that out. So we've obviously collected an insane amount of, plyo velocity numbers and mound velocity numbers, over the course of the company's history. So we have a pretty wide data set to draw from. So we actually did that, and we'll be releasing them with the balls. I think Besky can probably touch on it, a little bit more nuanced, but that's essentially the idea, is that, you can, if you're new to weighted balls, you can perform some sort of a like velocity baseline test with plyos, assuming you're on ramped and all of those things. Or if you're a more advanced trainee or someone that's used weighted balls before, you probably have an idea like, this is where I kind of sit with the blue ball when I'm really trying to let it go. You can plug those numbers in, plug in your mound velocity, and what it'll essentially spit back to you is what your expected number should be on our standard plyo set. So And then what you can do is you can figure out, all right, where am I off? Okay, I really suck at throwing the light balls. Those numbers are way off. Expected velo on this gray ball should be 95. Like I'm barely breaking 90 or whatever.
Yeah.
And what this tool will do is basically recommend to you which balls or which set of balls you should throw in the upcoming throwing phase, assuming you're trying to gain, velocity. And I think we've used it internally basically this entire time. And I think it's really cool. I think it's a really good example of a way too that if you're just totally unsure about how to use them, because there is such wide use cases for them, this is one way to like get started. Like, oh, okay, I clearly am not good at throwing these heavy balls. There's probably something to training in that, in those balls specifically, like in a targeted way to improve those numbers, and then retest and then figure out, all right, where are my expected velos at, currently or whatever. So,
Got it. What's when you like plug in your velocity to get in, or get your like expected plyo velo numbers back? What is that? Is that built on like, on average, these people who throw this in gym on average have this velocity during their like plyo velo days, or is it like these guys who threw these balls gained this much time or this much velocity over time, and kind of like individualizing that way?
Yeah, so it's more the former. The first step is sort of just gaining context on where they fall, and I think it's really helpful for especially people new to throwing plyos and plyo veloing. I remember my first plyo veloing online training. It's like I have no clue how hard I should be throwing this. If it pops up with whatever 50 for a green roll in, is it good?
Yeah.
Like I've just have absolutely no context for that. So especially if you're like an individual athlete, or just like haven't been like rigorously documenting your plyo velo numbers from a bunch of athletes, really difficult to know what to expect. So I think that's super helpful, because then that also provides more motivation for like, if a guy comes in here in his first plyo velo, he just doesn't really know what he's doing and he's just kind of throwing them. It's like, you should have probably a couple more ticks in you, given how hard you're throwing off the mound. So I think that's really helpful. Oftentimes we'll see guys kind of struggle to find that at first, where their first couple plyo velos, as they get used to it, they really sort of gain the feel for throwing plyos hard. And I think having the feedback of like what the average velocity would be is super helpful for guys to kind of shorten that learning curve and kind of get up to speed a little bit quicker on them. It's ripping sort of like the average velocity given your velocity off the mound. What do we see athletes throw for different ball weights and drill combinations as well?
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about the like motivation piece. If you're throwing alone, you don't have somebody else to compare like your green ball number 2 or your blue ball number 2. Like you can have this like threshold or benchmark to try to hit based on what other people typically throw. That's interesting. Is it usually on the like light side or the heavy side that guys struggle more to reach those numbers?
It's almost always on the lighter side.
So like they'll under, or their like gray ball velocity, the lightest ball we have is typically lower than what the plow velo calculator.
Yeah, generally, because if you think of like the basic theory and training principles behind like the heavier implements is they're designed to, they promote more efficient movements. So generally speaking, when guys are throwing the heavier balls, like the ball itself or the implement itself is, potentially helping them move in a more efficient way. Whereas that kind of goes away with, a ball that's less than 5 ounces or, even anything remotely lighter. They're not relying on the implement to help them in any way. And that's usually why they skew down. But I think there's also something too to just like being able to scale the variability, right? Like, I also think of it as, you brought up guys that are like super novices to weighted ball training, have never done a plyo velo or something like that before. Maybe they've never even done these drills before. So if you have, I don't want to say big because it's not like, we're going from like a 4-pound ball to like a 5-ounce ball or something. There's obviously balls in the middle, but if you have someone that's like, low training experience, is maybe younger, not as strong, low proprioception, all these different things. They've never done these drills before. It might not be the best idea to have like a ton of weight variability in the implements. Might be a better idea to like clump them closer to a 5-ounce ball, closer to competition weight, because that's something that they're familiar with.
Yeah.
And then maybe when they get a hold of the drills and they figure out how to use the drills and what the purpose of each one is, then maybe you can shift them from there. Like the way I always looked at it when I was training, less advanced athletes was just that like early on, I don't want them trying to make adjustments or figure out how to move the implement. I want them to first understand the purpose of the drill, what change we're trying to drive and derive from the drill, then worry about, okay, I figured out how to do a janitor. I understand like what I'm trying to drive. I understand for me what the drill is for. I understand how to do it. Now let's figure out how I can throw the shit out of this red ball, So maybe early on, there's too much variability. Maybe for, someone who's a little bit more advanced, you want more variability. I mean, I think it's just a way to scale it up and down. It's not a novel concept if you think about it. I mean, this is something that track and field does pretty regularly. Like if you look at, in fact, we'll have a blog on this or a little bit touching on this next week that Steve wrote, who literally pretty much should be credited with, the idea of even throwing these.
He was throwing the hitting plyos super early, right?
Yeah, he was using them really, really, really early. But it's not a novel thing. I mean, it's something that's pretty common in track and field, to have, portions of the sports development plan or the training plan where there's more of a focus on the lighter implements, or there's more of a focus on the heavier implements, or there's more of a focus clumping the weights around, the competitive weight. And I think just having more implements to choose from just kind of allows you to do that. And then, we can talk about some of the other kind of weirder things that I've done this off season, because I've used them with every pro that I train this off season uses these, and everyone that I currently train uses them in the season as well.
Do you choose different balls during the season than you would? I mean, you talked about it earlier a little bit with Tate, like early in the off season, giving him heavier balls to, well, like theoretically safer and lower load, lower peak load at least. And then is it like during the season you go a little bit lighter, like for like warm ups or whatever?
Yeah,
before the game.
What I actually did this season with all of my guys is I basically made 2 sets of plyos for them. So on their high intensity days, which for most guys is going to be game day or their primary bullpen, the set skews a little bit lighter because we want to get the arm going, we want to throw harder, and especially for relievers on game day, they need to get going. So we want to skew a little lighter. On recovery days, hybrid days, just non-high intensity days, the set skews a little bit heavier. For example, like I don't know on a like hybrid B day if there's just like any benefit to a big leaguer like throwing a gray ball at like 80 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Because it's a hybrid B, right? Like why would that be beneficial at all? Are they getting anything out of that drill and that throw specifically outside of like the fitness benefits? Probably not. And then going back to what I said originally, in season when we're trying to maintain workload, keep it high, but do so in a safe way, if you skew them a little bit heavier on those days, then you can potentially get more volume in on top of that because they're throwing the heavier implements. And again, it also just helps auto-regulate the intensity, right? Like I'm not there, right? So the last thing I want is like on a hybrid B day, one of these guys feels really good and he starts just like ripping gray balls.
Then he's hanging for his game.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I've actually moved to that. So all of my guys in season kind of have 2 sets of plyos. A kind of non-high intent set and a high intensity set. And obviously there's some overlap.
Yeah.
And the drills are still there, right? Guys are still doing pivot picks, it's heavier focus, but the set just skews lighter on those high intensity days, skews a little heavier on the non-high intent days.
Interesting. Yeah. Cause I've been looking at a ton of pulse numbers lately, and we've been, the main thing we found with our internal uses is that guys don't down regulate their intensity enough on low intensity days. And I honestly didn't even think about just put a heavier ball in their hand. It'll hopefully, like it might get them, with a little bit less intensity. And obviously we found that it's a little bit, the actual load is lower too. So and also if you see like a 70 miles an hour on the radar gun instead of like you're pretty close to your PR, you're probably slightly less inclined to be like, oh, I can just ramp it up a little bit and then like let it eat for 2 or 3.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been you know, I only work with a couple relievers in season at this point, but it's been unbelievably helpful for them because, you know, they just got to be ready to throw all the time. So it's really hard for them to get a ton of work in between appearances, and, you know, managing their throwing fitness and just like their workload is difficult. And, you know, you want to, you know, steal as many throws as you can without, you know, jeopardizing performance on the mound. So being able to skew them a little heavier, you know, has, you know, been successful for me to get them more throws in a way that doesn't like tax them a crazy amount. They still get their patterning work, and they still get the benefits from the drills, and they still get to make a decent amount of throws and still be ready, you know, for the game without having to, you know, rip a bunch of gray balls or something like that.
Yeah, John Creel made a shout out John made a tweet thread about how like maybe it was just one tweet, but he was talking about how like a couple of days before a game he limits himself to like less than 5 max effort throws, which doesn't seem like a lot, but he's found that like if he rips more than just 5 max intent throws, like 2 days later he might still not be ready to come back. So that seems super powerful for sure. Keep people from like really letting it eat.
Yeah, there's also guys that just like they just like can't throw a gray ball light, you know.
Yeah.
Like they're just gonna throw it upper 80s no matter what, you know. And it's just like for a reliever on a hybrid B day, or if he's doing like a touch and feel and getting ready for that, like that's probably not a good idea, you know. I'd rather the lightest ball he throws is like a yellow ball or whatever, you know. That way if he like lets it eat on a yellow ball, it's kind of the baseball equivalent, or if he lets it eat on a red ball, you know, hopefully he doesn't, but it's a little bit of like a safety net, I guess, in some regards. And it's been really, really helpful. Guys have really, really liked it quite a bit.
Do we do similar things with the leather weighted baseballs? Like on lower intent days, or just volume days, like going like more 11 ounce and 9 ounces, or
I don't, only
that pretty
because I mean you definitely could. Definitely could. I don't, only because most of the leather weighted ball stuff for guys in season, at least for me, is you know, mostly done at 60 to 70% anyway. It's just you know, to put a leather ball in their hands, repattern some of the drills and get them prepared for long toss or whatever. But you definitely could. You definitely could. And like I was talking to somebody about it the other day. If you think about like the variability in weight in the leather balls, like it's not much, right? Like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 11. You know, we're basically just like adding more implements on the plyo side to be able to like scale those up and down. And the same thing we do with leather balls. Like if you trained with us before, familiar with how we train velocity and like how we group pull downs, like some guys you know, have pull downs where they're just like underload specific, overload specific. You know, they have different spreads. Same thing with mound velos and weighted ball mound velos and different things like that. And having more implements just allows us to do that. And that's really where the calculator comes in, is to help drive more specific velocity training around the balls that you probably need to throw more.
Yeah, for sure. Do we plan on doing more like especially during the summer as we start to roll more of these out? Like, are we planning to do some like longitudinal, like kind of incorporate some like training effects into some like a tool like the Plyoballs calculator? Or
Yeah. I think the biggest thing now is with pretty much everything we do, we're logging it. So we're really keeping track of the longitudinal effects of guys who we think are candidates for sort of overload or underload for a variety of reasons. Sort of like one of my guys, like his first week, he had like a shoulder capsule tear in high school and just like really struggled to get layback since then. So that was like the biggest thing. Like his lowest hanging fruit was just like, all right, like if we can figure out how to get you more layback, that's probably good. If we can take you from, I think you started off at like 3rd percentile up to like 15th percentile layback, like that's probably going to help you the most. And so with that, he was able to associate that with like, he could immediately connect it with being pushy. And so when he was throwing the plyos, he's like, I just really feel like the heavier balls, the blue and the green, like I'm not pushing it. I can feel it lay back. And so with that, we just shaded to the heavy balls. And I mean, in conjunction with a lot of work on the physical therapy side, Barry really got him right there. I mean, he gained like 10 degrees of external rotation. So it's that sort of thing of being able to tailor it. And then, so with us logging all of that, we'll be able to kind of look back and look at both the mechanical changes as well as velocity changes for sort of guys who are trying to target with more specific ball weight assignments.
Yeah, we're doing A/B testing. Well, we're collecting for the A/B testing right now. Honestly, like when Steve initially started doing this, like I said, I think I mentioned it already. He basically just had one athlete that he thought like, okay, I think this guy he's been training with us for a little while. I think he needs a little bit more of a novel stimulus. He's kind of plateaued a little bit. Let's see if I can have him throw the hitting balls and the different weights, and maybe it like helps him break through a plateau or gives him something a little bit different. And then he started using them with more and more guys, and I honestly like pushed back on it a little bit early on. I think like my initial reaction was just like, look, our guys gained like a ridiculous amount of velocity already. Like I don't know that we need to like make any changes or whatever. And he was like, that's not the idea. The idea is like, can we drive even better results? Can we provide them sooner? Can we like if a guy is selling out for velo, does using these balls help reduce any like cost that maybe comes with that on the mechanical side of things? So that's what some of the testing that we're doing right now, basically just putting guys through our kind of normal standard set velocity training stuff, and then specifically using the calculator to dictate which balls they should throw in their velocity phase, and we're going to see what the results are. So are we able to, drive better movement changes while also driving, higher velos? Are we seeing like velos go up quicker? And yeah, we're doing a lot of that collection now. We started it quite a while ago, but we started it in the pro off season, and we don't train, or at least we didn't this pro off season train, hundreds of dudes that need velocity. It was a lot of pitch design stuff and some more nuanced, maybe command stuff or whatever. So we just didn't have a large enough sample to really put anything out, but this summer has afforded us quite a large one.
Yeah. Hell yeah. The pushy comment you made makes sense to me. And I think there's a sweet spot too, which I think there's a good amount of evidence there for, especially the pink ball, because the black ball is really heavy. And we did our pink ball study, which we have a blog about. So for those not familiar yet, but basically found that the black ball, we found this in the Plyoballs study too, which I don't think we've published yet, but the heaviest ball at max effort in the plyo. So the green ball in the Plyoballs study, guys got a little bit shorter and probably guarding a little bit. And then in the study where we looked at the black ball, pink ball, and green ball, we saw that guys were just generally more pushy with the black ball, like statistically significantly more pushy with the black ball than the green ball. So like maybe the pink ball is a better balance in weight while still maintaining like a safe and like good weight to push forward like adaptations we actually want to see.
Yeah. What's funny too is that like the pink ball and like these new plyos like didn't even come together at the same. They were like two totally separate things. The pink ball was kind of like Bodie's idea from quite a while ago, and then the new plyos were just like something born from Heart's mind basically. It just so happens that we're just gonna like sort of combine them, launch them at the same time. But the ping ball is like super interesting, and the reason why we even ran did the investigation was just because anecdotally we were seeing just like a lot of guys with either good arm action already or guys that we were trying to improve arm action. It wasn't necessarily getting worse with the black ball, but for some athletes the throw just got more pushy because maybe because of their training age, strength levels, a variety of different things. They just like naturally got more pushy. It took them a long time to figure out how to move that implement, which there could be some good to that. But for guys that you're trying to train a significant amount of things over a short amount of time, you maybe just don't have that time for them to like adapt to the implement itself. And yeah, the big thing was just seeing, does it make sense to put a ball in between there. It is kind of a big jump to go
Yeah,
from
it
the,
is.
the black to the green, you know?
2x, baby.
Yeah, it's a pretty big jump. And so, just experimenting with it. Plus, we took a bunch of polls. I think we asked, like on Twitter, we asked in our Plus Slack, and just asked a bunch of guys like who's still using the black ball for pivot picks. And there was still like a significant amount of people using it, but the overwhelming majority was basically saying like, I just double up on green, or I go with green and blue. And so I think it just made sense for us to like make the prototype pink balls and start to try them. And we gave a couple out to some like trusted partners and some long-term trainees, and just the feedback was really, really good. And when we did the investigation, a lot of our assumptions, I guess, were confirmed. There wasn't a ton of difference, between the pink and the black ball. The black ball was still driving a lot of things that we want to see. And, but the big thing was just when you combine some of those findings with just like the subjective feedback from a ton of trainees and trainers, I think it just made sense to, pull the trigger and launch a ball in between. And, I don't know, guys have just like really, really liked it.
Yeah. Is it replacing the black ball in like the recovery circuit too? For like rebounders and
right now, no. We don't really have any plans for that, but it could. I mean, there's the idea is, it's not like the 4-pound ball or whatever is like a magic number. It's just that it was clear that like a significant overload implement was like important. But from a recovery perspective, we haven't changed anything. We honestly haven't changed anything at all. Like our standard programming and the way we program most athletes is the same. The pink ball just comes in based on training age, actual age, experience, strength levels. Because, we do also get athletes that are older, but they're just really, really weak. And it's going to be difficult because of that for them to move the black ball in any drill.
Yeah.
So it might be better to scale down or whatever, There might be rehab cases where, we want to skew heavier, but maybe the black ball is a little too heavy or something like that. Or, I've had instances where, the athlete is just hesitant coming off of some sort of surgical intervention to throw that heavy an implement. So the compromise is to just, use the pink ball or double up on green or something like that. The big thing that at least I saw anecdotally and why I pushed on it so hard was just, I had a lot of athletes that I trained that their arm action is already super efficient. We're not really trying to drive any arm action changes in like pivot picks. But if I put the black ball in their hand, like the throw just gets worse because it just becomes a little bit more pushy, or they just don't move that heavy of an implement all that well. And again, there could be some benefits to just telling them, hey, you gotta figure out how to move the implement. But when you're dealing with, someone who makes a living throwing a baseball and you're trying to train so many different things, I don't have time for them. Their arm action's already good. I'd rather put an implement in their hand that they can move well and change the focus of the drill, right? So like Tate's a good example. His arm action's already fantastic. There's not really a reason to have the focus of pivot picks be on the arm action. For him, it's more on like sequencing from the ground up and like pelvis and torso rotation, sequencing properly. At least that's what we work the focus of the drill on. So for me, it just doesn't make sense to put a super heavy implement into his hand in that type of a situation.
For sure. People sleep on the lower half in pivot picks.
Oh yeah. It's I think like that drill is unbelievably good for that. I think it's a big time hack.
Oh yeah. New plyos coming out today when this launches. So this pod's coming out Monday.
Yeah, Plyo Velo calculator will be with it, and that'll be free. So
on Plus.
Yep, that'll be free on Plus. So anybody can use it. And yeah, kind of like Besky alluded to, you can use it to help maybe dictate which balls you should be throwing in like your next velocity phase, or even, potentially your on-ramp phase. Even if you're someone who's thrown weighted balls before, done a plyo velo or can do some sort of baseline and know your max mound velo, just because you're going in an on-ramp doesn't mean you can plug it into the, you could plug it into the calculator and be like, all right, I suck at the light balls. Maybe in my on-ramp, I should like, buy the dark green ball and mix in some lighter implements a little bit more frequently because I'm not very good at throwing those. Or if you are going into a velo phase and you want to, have an overload or an underload focus, but are not sure which one to use or how to structure it, the calculator could be like pretty valuable.
Is it bucketed by age or like playing level at all?
I believe we might have something in there for like experience with plyos. I think it's the biggest thing. These guys who are more experienced.
Yeah,
If you've
that
been
makes
doing
sense.
plyovelos for years, you probably have a better feel for the drills, moving max effort within the drills, and then moving the plyos at max effort.
Yeah, that's what we noticed with the Plyo study too. Like the guys who we got a bunch of employees to be subjects, and we had some actual athletes who've been training for a while, and the people who were the employees who didn't throw them all the time, when they got to throwing the green ball, basically max effort, it was like, oh man, your mechanics, like horizontal abduction, everything else was like, it's significantly different from the others. So clearly this is you're not used to this. It's pretty heavy. But
Yeah, pink ball launches too. We have a blog kind of ready to go that talks about some of the stuff that we talked about here, but more specifically like the origin story, if you will, of the new implements, kind of some of the, theory behind, more or less variability and things like that, that Steve wrote. That'll be coming out in conjunction with this.
let's go, Steve.
We'll probably re-up the pink ball investigation. We do have some other stuff that we want to do to investigate, not just the pink ball, but the other balls that we kind of talked about. But yeah. And then plus we didn't even really touch on, it's probably better to have Devin on and talk about it. But like, I think the applications to like youth athletes is just like so massive.
For sure. Yeah. Cause like your just overall strength probably matters a lot with, or I guess development and development age.
Yeah. What we ran into a lot with like the younger athletes or, smaller athletes or whatever, it's just like, because, our implements just naturally skewed a little heavier to begin with, like in our standard set, you just found like a lot of programming with those guys were just like, all right, throw 2 red balls and 2 yellow balls. And it's just like, that's not much variability in their training. Maybe it would be better to have 4 balls, but they just don't go that heavy because this athlete is 10 years old or whatever, And so the applications to youth are pretty crazy as well. I just think like it just makes a ton of sense to be able to scale your training up or down based on a variety of different factors, and you just need more implements to choose from, and that's just basically what we did. But yeah, next week, and we're pretty fired up about it.
Pretty gas.
Yeah.
What about All-Star break's over? Guys, got any comments about how the season's going? Is Sweeper still king?
Sweeper's still definitely king, so long as you throw it hard enough. But no, I'm excited for the second half. Our Advantage Plan athletes, we now have like an internal report that goes out every day that basically looks at all of our results from our Advantage Plan athletes on the pitching and hitting side. We look at a ton of stuff, but primarily try to hone in on WAR and see if we're creating any surplus WAR with those athletes. And I can only speak to the pitching side. I mean, the hitting side's right there too, but the pitching results are just like insane. I mean, insane.
And
like
that's above projections, right?
Yeah,
that's what you mean by surplus.
Yep.
Like projected WAR
above
for this
projected.
year, and then
they're just insane. Everything is just pretty off the charts. Like ERA reduction, K rate going up, walk rate going down, miss distance going down. Reduction in
miss distance. You're talking about command, dude?
Yeah.
Did you know your Driveline?
Big command results. I think we're down. Advantage Plan guys are down like almost an inch in miss distance.
Let's go.
Yeah, velocity. I mean, the results are just like pretty crazy. So I'm excited to see how we sustain that in the second half. I think our guys typically perform unbelievably well in the second half, just because the reality is a lot of guys throwing fitness starts to take a shit.
Workload, baby.
Starts to take
You
a
ever
shit.
heard about Pulse?
Right. The second half, you want to save your bullets, so guys start throwing less. Our guys don't do that, and we typically see really, really good results in the second half. So I'm excited to see that stuff. So.
Fuck yeah. What about the Mariners, Besky? They gonna keep going on a run?
They
Making
have
a playoff
to,
run?
right?
Yeah.
I gotta believe more than last year.
Yeah, for sure. If they can do what they did at the end of the season last year, continue doing that now, hey, maybe they got a shot at the I think their playoff odds were like 50% or something last week, which is like the highest they've been.
3 wildcard teams.
Yeah.
3 wildcard teams.
Let's go.
Wild.
Baby.
Yeah.
Literally wild.
Yeah. 3 wildcard teams. It's crazy.
Anyways, you guys got anything else?
No. Yeah, these will be out next week. For sure, if you have questions on how to use them or anything like that, you can hit up CR. You can hit up our Plus Slack if you're a Plus member and you're in there. There's a ton of different ways to reach out, but I think, I just think the use cases are like pretty wide, and we're pretty excited about it. And I think the calculator can be extremely helpful for anyone that is new to throwing plows or already throws them. But yeah, if guys have questions, or even better, if you guys have ideas, anyone listening to how you feel like you can implement these and some things that you're doing with them, we'd love to hear those too, I think.
Yeah, hit the comments below, like and subscribe to the channel. But seriously, it's tools on Plus for free. You'll make an account, you can get it for free. Code good to learn, the number 2 is I think 10% discount for the pod. Support the boys. And yeah, we'll see you next week, episode 90.
Yeah. One other thing, we're selling them individually, so we
A la
felt
carte.
we felt like that might be better, especially for guys that like already have plyos, rather
little
than selling them,
supplementary sets.
yeah, rather than jumping and just selling like sets or whatever. Maybe buying specific ones if you feel like there's some balls you want to leverage, some ones you don't, or whatever. But yeah, get on the tool, order some balls, hit us with feedback, use cases, questions. We're ready for it.
Let's go, baby. Thank you, gentlemen. Peace.